Air on Twitter and First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And of course, you can find us on Facebook. So let's begin with our top story. The former president, Donald Trump, was in Washington, D.C. yesterday to attend his arraignment before a federal judge. He faces criminal charges resulting from his alleged efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. Trump's indictment consists of 4 charges, which include conspiracy to defraud the United States government, conspiracy to obstruct and impede the congressional proceeding on January 6th, conspiracy against the right to vote and have one's vote counted, 1 count of obstruction, and an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. So, what do we think? Are these charges going to stick? Is the former president in trouble? Crickets.
It does sound like he's in legal trouble. I mean, he's been indicted. A grand jury has reviewed this and agreed that he should be brought to trial on this. So that's a serious matter. I'm not an attorney, so I really don't know how to assess how strong the government's case is, but a lot of attorneys I've seen have had split opinions, but there have been those who have said it's a very strong case against him and that it does have a lot of people who have testified about interactions, what he said not only in public, but also what he was saying behind the scenes. So I think that legally, anytime you're indicted, you're in trouble.
And there are those people who can only, like I remember him standing in that overcoat on that cold January 6th with his fist in the air, rallying support for people, that some might misconstrue that as a call to arms or a call to go to battle. And so the result was something that, like 9/11, is going to be seared in my brain. People were running up, throwing chairs at police officers, breaking windows, sitting in Pelosi's chair, and causing everybody from the vice president, Mike Pence, to lawmakers to have to be hustled to secure safety places because somebody had invaded a building that the only time regular folks get in there is on a tour.
Yeah.
I'm not an attorney, so I'll preface my thoughts by saying that. But reading the analysis of this case, what is, and even the past indictments, what's interesting to me is that the lengths the U.S. government has had to go to find a specific law or charge to charge him under, because in the 200 some odd years of the history of our democracy, there is no foundation or framework to criminally charge a sitting and now former president with trying to steal an election. It's something that never occurred in the framers' mind from the document that they wrote to govern our democracy in the 18th century, which is held up until now. And so now it's like conspiracy to defraud the United States. It's the closest charge that could be brought under the current law as it's written to charge the now twice impeached, 3 times indicted, pending a 4th former president who's still running for another term. And it's unconscionable to me that everyone who watched what happened on January 6th, when thousands of people marched to the Capitol, broke through the barricades, mobbed the Capitol Police, stormed through the halls, and then carried a Confederate flag through the halls of the Capitol, which didn't even happen in the Civil War, can say, oh, this is overreach.
Yeah.
Really? It's too much? Because I don't think so.
Yeah. I think that the one thing that the Trump presidency showed us is that a lot of the ways that our government functions is not necessarily based on rules, but on traditions. Like, we have these traditions that are in place that we've always done, and he just blows through those traditions. He doesn't follow them. He doesn't want to, he adheres to his one shining rule, which is, what he wants, And so to Nikisha's point, like, in order to bring cases against him, we have to go, the government has to go deep into the law to find places that they can say, okay, like, this was wrong, because we don't have books on laws on the books that basically outline all the things that he's done during his presidency as being definitely against the law. We have feelings that things shouldn't be done, i.e., like Trump still owning the hotel where a lot of uh, foreigners and
Diplomats and
diplomats would
ambassadors.
come in. So he's making money off of doing state work, and also it could be, not saying that it was bribery, but it could be seen as a form of bribery. But because we don't have serious laws with serious consequences for that behavior, he gets away with it.
You know, a proper journalist has a rule of ethics that we have to follow, and one of those is you can't accept a free gift. If I got a free pen, that's one thing. If I was given a free Bluetooth or a free phone, that has to be handed in, or like we used to do at the Times Union, it would go into a charity auction, and someone else would buy it, and the money would go to charity. So that's the rule of ethics that a good journalist follows, and there are rules of ethics for politicians, whether or not they're followed. We all have examples. Chicago, New York, always well known for having politicians who didn't follow the rules.
Sure.
Well, I think Vice President Pence, former Vice President Pence, had some really strong words about the indictment in Trump, and he talked about how anyone who puts himself above the Constitution should never be president after the indictment was released. And so I would agree there are certain traditions and norms that Trump tries to break through. But, you know, the issue in the indictment is not a tradition. It's a matter of the certification of the results of the election, and
Sure.
a case where President Trump told the vice president, according to the indictment, to not certify the results. And Trump said, there's nothing in the Constitution that will allow me to do what you're asking me to do, and I'm bound by the Constitution. And so that's really the heart of the case, is there's things that we don't really think about. When we go to the polls, we vote, the votes are counted, they're announced, we think we have a president elected. But there is this final step, and that's what the big battle was about in January 6th, and all that other stuff was the certification of the results. And that is the heart of the indictment. I think that Trump was looking for ways, after the votes had been cast and counted, to try and knock out legitimate votes and try to stop the certification so that it could become a political matter rather than the voters of this country deciding who the president would be.
One thing that is interesting to me is previously Attorney General Merrick Garland has said that the Justice Department is going to continue to go after and prosecute people that were at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, and they were going to continue, whether they were small cases or large cases, and they were going to continue to go up in a ladder, so to speak, on those bigger cases. So the timing of this is also interesting for me because this is more than 2 years after the actions of January 6th, and now we're starting to see a criminal indictment directly against Donald Trump, former President Trump, for what he did allegedly on January 6th. And it makes a lot of sense because from the Justice Department, from what Merrick Garland has previously said, they've been building and building and building, and now they have a foundation for cases that they've been prosecuting throughout the last couple of years, and now they have, and maybe in their eyes, the big guy, the head cheese, so to speak, that they're going after right now.
And building off what Stephen's saying, I thought I heard yesterday that indeed some of the folks who will testify in this case themselves could end up getting indicted because there are more, as you said, there's more chips to fall on this one.
If it seems like, and I know that there has been a lot of wringing of hands and consternation on the left, but it seems like the Attorney General has been slowly building a case bit by bit in order to present something that that he feels is airtight.
Right. And from, as I say what I'm about to say, I will also preface that I'm not a lawyer. I just watch a lot of true crime shows on TV. So,
Bomb.
I know, I watch Law and Order. I feel like maybe I'm an expert.
right. Yeah, exactly. But from what I've been able to gather, this is what you want to do, especially whenever you're dealing with a case that is so unprecedented as a former president being charged directly with the actions of January 6th.
Yeah.
So it seems like something that needs to happen, and there needs to be that solid foundation first before you can go and
please correct me if I'm wrong, because there's been a lot of indictments here. So we had the first set was really about the
The New York indictment was about the hush money paid to Stormy
right,
Daniels.
about the Stormy
The
Daniels.
second indictment is about the documents that were the classified
The second
documents.
set of indictments.
Second set of indictments
Yes.
was about the classified documents that he refused to give back. Now this is the third set of indictments about January 6th, and then there's a pending fourth investigation and possible indictment out of Georgia because of his meddling and interfering in the counting of votes and calling to say, hey, I just need some more votes. Can you do something for
And
me?
that has his actual phone call.
His phone call, his voice, his request.
Right. This leads back to my earlier comment about the idea that our government absolutely has laws and rules, but there are a lot of traditions and things that we think should not happen, but not actually codified by law. And that is like Trump could get indicted on all of these and he could still run for president, correctly? Correct.
And still serve as president,
And still
even if
serve
he's
as
convicted.
president. Right.
Mhm.
From
I mean,
prison.
you would think that like that alone, like would prevent somebody from being able to even run for any office, let alone the highest office in the country.
And I think that's a failure of the United States Senate, who, after the House filed articles of impeachment and walked them over to the Senate, refused to convict, refused to, remove him from office, refused to issue a punishment that would bar him from ever running or holding public office again. So he's impeached but not removed from office. And then after that vote goes through, Mitch McConnell comes down to the Senate floor and gives this eviscerating, excoriating rebuke of the president that he refused to remove from office, who's now running again, still in the lead by most accounts in all polls, and could now serve as president from prison if ever indicted on any of these charges. That is absolutely maddening. And yet here we are. And I think the real problem is that so many Americans in general take for granted that it couldn't happen. And that's what happened in 2016. Like, oh, he'll never win. He'll never win. He'll never win. And he did. And that's happening again. This apathetic attitude because you don't like the direction, you don't like your options, so you refuse to be engaged, leads to unprecedented situations like this where there is a candidate running for president who has 3 indictments and is using that press to fuel his donations and his campaign and is still holding a lead over the next contenders, including the governor of Florida.
Yeah. You can join the conversation at 549-2937. You can tweet us at FCC on air. First Goes Connect at WJCT.org, and you can find us on Facebook and on YouTube. Speaking of the governor of Florida, who is currently running against Trump, it seems that after these indictments came out, crickets from most of the Republicans who were running against him. And if they were not silent, they definitely did not straight up call him out. I think the only one that said anything was Pence. And Pence is in a tricky spot himself. So it feels like fear. It feels like straight up like I am scared to say anything bad about the former president because it will hurt me in the polls.
Absolutely.
Could it even be that they're waiting to see, like a fisherman who's just thrown chum into the water, to see what happens with the rest of the pack, and maybe they come out as a survivor?
Mm-hmm.
And let's not even forget the fact that ex-President Trump now faces legal action that he's got to attend. He doesn't have to attend a lot of the next hearings, but as he's campaigning, he's still got 3, potentially 4 court appearances and follow-up appearances that he has to work on with his attorneys, and that will take time out of any person's life if you're trying to run a business or do whatever that you've got to go handle stuff in court.
That was my question whenever I was watching the proceedings yesterday in Washington, D.C., was what does this mean for the election? I mean, I know that there are voters out there that have an opinion of the former president, and that will likely not change. But to Dan's point, you were going to have to take time out of your day. It's going to take a toll on you. If you have 3, possibly 4 criminal proceedings against you, that's going to take a toll on your life, whether you're running for president or not. And that was my question, was how is this ultimately going to play out in the race for 2024? There could be an opportunity for some of these other Republican candidates to jump ahead possibly if
Possibly, but
Yeah.
I think one thing that Nikisha says that is really sticking to me is that, like, what we have seen from Donald Trump for as long as he's been a public figure is that he figures out, this is a talent. He figures out how to monetize everything that's happening to him, whether it's good or bad. He figures out how to make money off of it, and so I think that if you are against him in the election, you're being very careful because you're watching how he's fundraising off of these indictments. These indictments are going to be a windfall for him.
But not even how he's fundraising off of the indictments. Donald Trump is a media personality first and foremost. Some may call him a businessman, some may refer to him as an ex-president, but he is also a media personality and knows how to work the media very well. Donald Trump also has a chokehold on the Republican Party, become the status of the bully pulpit, not just as a former president, but how he performed in the 2016 campaign. There's a debate coming up in a couple of weeks, right? None of these candidates want to go to that debate and then come out with a moniker like Lion Ted Cruz or Little Marco that will ruin their campaign because now people think it's funny and think they're a joke and think they're a mockery and like, oh, you got, blasted on by Donald Trump on the debate stage. Nobody wants that to happen, and yet none of them are strong enough, bold enough, courageous enough to say, hey, he's wrong for the country. If you don't think he's wrong for the country, why are you running for president? If you don't think that what he did is criminal, illegal, or just, there could be a better way, why are you running for president? Because then it's going to be more of the same. Donald Trump based his whole presidency in 2016 against Hillary Clinton on the fact that she had emails. And it was lock her up, lock her up, lock her up, chanted at every single rally. No one's saying that about Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think there's probably a pretty strong sentiment within the Republican Party, or a large amount of Republican Party voters, that this is persecution, not prosecution, and that Donald Trump is being singled out.
He is not Jesus. I'm sorry.
By a Joe Biden Justice Department and Democrats who are trying to essentially drag him into trying to use the criminal justice system to score political points off him. And I think there is a strong feeling within the Republican Party of that. And anybody who wants to attack Trump in the Republican Party primary risks alienating those voters.
And he did say persecution and prosecution yesterday, standing there with his Trump embroidered umbrella in front of his Trump emblazoned plane.
Yeah.
So,
But if he thinks he's being persecuted by a Joe Biden appointed Justice Department, he can always appeal to the Supreme Court he's stacked. I have no sympathy.
And we're going to take a caller. We got Eugene on the north side. How are you, sir?
Hey, good morning to all, and Mr. Latson, for my first time calling in on your show. In regards to the conversation you guys are having about Mr. Trump, I think we need to take a step back and consider his supporters. As I look at this whole thing as it unfolds for years now, he's like a cheerleader. Really, there's multitudes of people out there in America and outside of America that he speaks for, and this is how they feel. And he's just thriving off it. He's getting real wealthy. But we got people from the military to private sector that just, they're in lockstep with this guy. And it's a problem because it has eroded our political system and our relationships in America. Not all, but a lot of relationships have been torn to the point where we went back in time when it come down to racial equality 20 years as a result of the last president. I'll take my response off the air from you guys. Have a good day.
Gene, thanks so much. Yeah, I think what Gene is saying is that, like, former President Trump has definitely tapped into, some would say, a populist vein in the country, and that vein is tinged with, xenophobia, racism, all the things, and it's made it rise to the surface in a way that that really has put this country in a different space than it was prior to his being elected. I don't. Go ahead. You were about to say something.
Well, don't forget to be fair here. Don't forget that this news is overshadowing, as some Republicans are claiming, the troubles that President Biden is facing, especially with Hunter. There have been many issues with the son that have been cropping up, and a plea bargain that then failed because the judge basically said, "I don't think so." And that's still boiling on the surface, or under the surface, that our current president has to deal with as he's campaigning.
Yeah. There's a lot of different scandals going on in a lot of different places. Also, this week in Jacksonville, an internal affairs investigation conducted by the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office concluded Officer Justin Peppers demonstrated a history of repeated infractions of JSO orders. Of the 21 complaints against him, only 3 are being sustained. A video of an incident shows Peppers pulling a complying man out of his vehicle, black man out of his vehicle, handcuffing him while kneeling on his back and referring to him as Mr. Black, referring to him as Mr. Black Man. Peppers made the stop over a potential tinted windows violation. Officer Peppers has been reassigned to a different patrol zone. I think, one of the things that I saw a lot when this article or when this incident came to light is, a lot of news places were reporting that the man that he pulled out of the vehicle was a military veteran. And I did not put that in my sum up of this. I didn't say that because I think that is a qualifier that is really about respectability. Like, if this man is a military veteran, then suddenly we're supposed to care more. And I just reject that. I think that, like, he was a man who did nothing wrong. It has nothing to do whether he was a military veteran or anything. He was a black man that was pulled out for no real reason, like pulled out of his car. But I think that, like, the way we frame these conversations and the way we think about them, we really need to, like, dive into that. Like, why do we need qualifiers about this man to say, like, oh no, he was a good dude? It's one of the things that I see in the media that really irritates me.
Here is a man who drove 0.17 of a mile after the police lights came on. I can't even tell you how long that is. First Coast News did report it's 875 feet. He stops. His hands are out of the window. He's holding.
He put his keys out, too.
Put his keys out. He held his license and his registration. And then, according to the body cam tape, he is pulled out and put down to the ground. Whereas instead of just stay in the car, sir, we'll check your registration and we'll get back to you in a minute. And then you sit in your car and you stew. So to me, and plus I've got his internal affairs database here, and there are 3 pages of complaints against him. He's had informal counseling. He's had letters from his supervisor. He's had formal counseling. He apparently does not seem to work well with traffic stops, according to the First Coast News story. So his reassignment will apparently put him outside of that for right now.
I'm going to go to your first point, because just as it applies when we were previously talking about Donald Trump, it applies here. Racism, xenophobia, and authoritarian populism permeate every part of our society, period. With that said, Black people, since emancipation, have had to do the extra hurdles to think about how we are being perceived by white people before we do anything in our lives when we are in mixed company, so that we can make it home safely and sound and alive. So you just mentioned he went 875 feet, stopped, held out his keys, which means he turned off his car. He turned off his car, he held out his keys, his license, and his registration, which means now his hands are not on the wheel. He's not a threat. He doesn't have a gun. You can see his hands. And yet he was still yanked out of the car. But he's being qualified as a military veteran to make it seem as if, oh, he was a good one. Black people should not have to have high titles, degrees, businesses, famous names, billions in a bank account to be seen as people and to be conferred a dignity that you would give anybody else if they don't have this skin color. And that's a problem. And that's a problem that people don't talk about. And it's always been a problem in policing because policing in the United States began as slave patrols. Why we don't put those two things together is a problem. Why we don't look at why it's so difficult for black officers to overcome the systemic bias within the policing system to be promoted is a problem, which is why you have cases like the one in Memphis where those black officers stomped that boy to prove that they were just as good as the white officers that they work alongside of. You have to look at how racism affects the systems that are set up in this country to keep people in their place, because it's about control and it's about maintaining authority even when you're losing numbers as far as population.
What the reassignment of Peppers, the story that the reassignment tells us from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is that they still see Officer Peppers as an acceptable representation of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. If he was not an acceptable representation of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, he would be removed from dealing with the public. But if you move him to a different position, you're basically saying that it's acceptable for him to, you are saying that it's acceptable for him to deal with the public, and therefore it is acceptable for him to be looked at as a representative of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. And we have seen that time and time again. And so when advocates that speak out against police brutality and the system of policing that we currently have, this is exactly what they're pointing to. The idea that, like, you know, it's not, I think the conversation in America for a long time was, or for a while was like, defund the police. It's not necessarily like about getting rid of all the police. It's holding the police to the same standard that a civilian would be held to.
Absolutely. And that's something that doesn't happen. And with this officer being reassigned to another department, it's the old wink and a nod where it's like, okay, we're going to have to acknowledge publicly that you did this, but you know, you're still one of us. You're still good. We're going to keep you in office and carry on. It's something that we've seen through police cases, throughout the legal system, that happen all the time. If you think about the spate of lynchings that happened in the early to mid 20th century, 50 years of lynchings, everybody knows who did it.
Yep.
Everybody knows who did it. And those people walked free all the time. So, I mean, it's the same thing in a different way. And until there is a willingness and a want to do something different, whether it's the courts or the sheriff's office or Sheriff T.K. Waters himself to say, you know what, not on my watch. He has these claims. We're going to look into them and we're going to do something different, because obviously the counseling isn't helping. Obviously the reprimands aren't helping. Obviously the reassignments aren't helping. And to brush it off as, oh, he just doesn't do well with traffic stops. Why are we still stopping people for tinted windows anyway?
Was talking yesterday to Kelly Frazier, who is now the head of the Northside Coalition of Jacksonville, replacing her late father who passed away, the Ben Frazier that we all know and love. And one of the things she said that they will be working on with the coalition is civilian review boards for the sheriff's office. Our sheriff, the past sheriff, have said that's not going to happen, but she says that is what the Northside Coalition, and I'm sure other community groups, are going to be pushing for.
And school is starting. Duval County teachers head back to their classrooms on Monday to prepare for the return of students August 14th. Students can expect transportation delays as there are 49 vacancies for bus drivers. The district has 258 teacher vacancies, which is about half the number of vacancies from last year. What do we? I'm about to pose the question, like, why do we think these vacancies are here? But I think it's laughable because we all know a part of like what's fueling these vacancies. But please, I'm opening it up to the panel.
No, but even before we get to like the education standards and the new rejections of AP courses and all of that, teachers were already tired.
Yes.
Like, teachers were already tired. Like, coming out of the pandemic, even going into the pandemic where they're teaching from home on Zoom, to classes. They have to meet these different state standards and benchmarks. The paycheck is not doing what it needs to do. The math is not math, and inflation is rising. The bills aren't meeting. Teachers are tired. They can do other things and do other jobs, and a lot of them are leaving the profession for that very reason. Now, add to the fact that you have Florida's special set of education laws, it just may not be worth it. And I think the same thing goes for bus drivers, as we've seen in economic reports. There is not a shortage of jobs. There is not a shortage of workers. What there is a shortage of is patience. People are not willing to put up with the BS that they used to for a paycheck. They can do other things that have better benefits, can work fully remote, possibly from another country. I know lots of people who do that and live a better life. And so the things that need to happen to keep the workforce of teachers and bus drivers and other, blue collar workers, white collar workers that, uphold our systems and prop up our society as far as education and children are concerned, they need to be respected. They need to be paid well. They need to have good working conditions, and they need to have support. And they don't have that, especially in Florida.
Well, Al, my wife and I are helping take care of our grandchild, and we have to put him on the bus every day and wait for the bus. Last year, my wife was many times calling, where's the bus? The bus is late. The bus driver substitute can't find the house, whatever. Now we have X number, 49 vacancies, which means extended routes as bus drivers have to add another school to their trip, which means, for example, our grandchild was on a bus for 90 minutes to come home from summer school because his school was all the way on the other side of town. Now, at least there's an app that you can sign up for, and you can track where the bus is. But there were a number of times my wife would pop in the car with the grandchild and take that child to school because the bus was late and she and I had to get to work.
What are the solutions? Specifically, like, and just to break it down a little bit from the vacancies, like in the classroom, but specifically like with the bus drivers, is it that we need to be offering more money? That the maybe look at the benefits package? I mean, do we have any idea like how we're going to change this?
Well, I think that's a recurring problem. It seems like every year there's a shortage of bus drivers. I don't think this is the first year that's happened, and probably the solution is more pay, more competitive compensation package. We've seen that in all types of trucking jobs, all types of transportation jobs, in terms of signing bonuses and those kind of things, and that could be it. And in terms of teacher pay, I mean, this community did approve a property tax rate increase last year in a referendum. It was a close vote. They approved it. I guess I'd like to know if that didn't work, how come it didn't work? What's the deal in terms of, is there, what's the magic number then to get people to want to be a teacher? It can't be just pay. I mean, people are never going to be able to make as much money teaching as they would perhaps with other jobs with their training. But if there's some problem recruiting people because of pay, what is the number that they need to be offering out there?
I think pay absolutely has to have something to do with it. But I would say that so I don't want to speak for my friends, but I am friends with a lot of teachers. And I think for the teachers, mostly it comes down to, well, first of all, like in our political discourse, teachers get persecuted and treated like they are the enemy. And then all of these new regulations from the state really block you from teaching the way, from the type of education that I got when I was a kid. Like I went to Orange Park Elementary. Well, I went to Orange Park Elementary, middle school, and high school. And like, yes, there was absolutely issues at any school, but the education that I got was solid, and the teaching of history, like I had to do a whole lot more of educating myself about African American history in school, absolutely. But at Orange Park High School, at Orange Park Middle School, I got all the basics. I got things that I needed to know in places that made me curious to look for more things. And I think now what we're seeing is teachers being scared to teach because they may become a punching bag for the right if if they say one thing wrong, or if they play a video that has, LGBTQIA characters in it, if they talk about Black history, if they do anything that like veers in the area of, I hate this word, but veers in the area of quote unquote wokeness, then they could end up, being, their face could be plastered on a website somewhere, and then suddenly, their phone is blowing up and all sorts of things happen.
Now, another thing that I was just thinking of that could potentially be leading to these teacher shortages is the threat of mass shootings that we've seen all across the country at so many different schools. That definitely can take its toll. My mom worked in the school system where I grew up, and she retired, fortunately, before there were these string of mass shootings. I know that we've had, some in the past with Columbine and Sandy Hook and everything like that, but it seems like the frequency of them is more and more. And that could be one of the factors that leads to teachers not wanting to come back or choosing to go to it into a different profession, because they might be thinking of it in terms of, hey, I don't care how much money you pay me. I'm not going to put myself in that type of situation and be subject to all of these type of security systems that are in place with the fencing and the,
Yeah, when you say that, Steve, it makes me think of a PSA I saw recently that it starts off as a typical back to school PSA where, like, they're like, oh, this new backpack is great, and oh, look at like the new jeans I've got, and then it gets darker very slowly, and you see a girl running, and she's like, these new shoes help me run away from active shooters, and then everything becomes like, oh, this new sweater is great. It helps me, and she's using it to tie doors closed so that like an active shooter can't get to them. And it's like, watching that was horrific. I was literally like, I don't know if I can watch this thing. But I thought to myself, no, I need to watch it, because if I think watching this PSA is bad, imagine being a kid in a school that has to have drills for active shooters. It just makes you wonder, like, what are we doing in this country?
And those drills freak the kids and the
Yes.
teachers out. They're unannounced, and suddenly they're scurrying down a hallway with teachers on their cell phones yelling. I mean, you joke. There's Kevlar backpacks out there.
Yeah.
There's allegedly bulletproof backpacks. Get your sporty new Kevlar sweater. It's just scary. Don't forget now, the teachers are going to have smart button badges that they can tap if there's an emergency. The kids are going through not metal detectors now, but security scanners. When I was a kid in inner city New York City, there were metal detectors and cops at schools because of people carrying guns. Now we have to be worried about people inside and outside. And if you saw the guy last week at the Jewish school with the gun, who was thankfully gotten rid of before, that's active, it's happening, it's not a drill.
Yeah. So all of this, we are asking teachers to go back into the classroom and to deal with all of this. And while the tax increase may have given a bump, I don't know, but it may have given a bump. It feels like all the other stuff. I could never be a teacher. I'm not good at it. I've tried it. I'm horrible to the students that I taught. I'm sorry. It's not my ministry. But
Amen.
that being said, I think with all of the factors that we just laid out, and then we're asking them to go back into this, you really have to love teaching and students to be able to do it.
And talking with some of the teachers that I know, that's what drives them, is that love, that passion. That's what they want to do. They want to have an impact on children's lives and improve them for the better.
Yeah.
And that's what really drives them, even though they have to deal with setting up their classrooms and by themselves and not get paid for it and buy their own
Right.
supplies, and also have to go through all of these security measures and drills and everything like that.
Two of my closest friends are teachers. I'll say their names. Larry Knight and Vanessa Knight. They are both at Stanton, and both of them feel that way exactly.
Mhm.
Like, I watch them year after year, go back in and spend their own money on stuff for their classrooms, but they do it because they love the kids. They love like making a difference in people's lives and sharing education. And every year I look at them and I go, they're like saint-like, because I don't think I could do it.
And how much money are they spending to make sure that their kids have the right stuff? My wife, retired teacher, by this time of the year, she was out at Walmart picking up supplies for her students.
Yeah, that's the normal. And last, the First Coast has been experiencing extreme heat this summer. Mayor Deegan, along with the Heat Task Force, rolled out a new excessive heat incident plan. This plan designates 6 locations across Jacksonville as cooling centers during heat emergencies. JTA buses will be utilized as cooling buses on Sundays in the event of a heat emergency. JTA will also provide complimentary transportation to folks seeking relief at cooling centers. It feels like I've been a journalist now for somewhere around 15, 16 years, something like that. And I think when I first got into journalism, the thing that we were talking about was that climate change was coming. Climate change was coming, and heat waves and all the things were coming. And it feels now like it's here. Like it was probably here back then, but now you really see it. It is here. And so Mayor Deegan is thinking about like how to cool off. But I think, as a city, we need to zoom out and think even bigger about what that means to us. Not that the Deegan administration is not zooming out and thinking bigger. I'm just saying for the purposes of this conversation.
40 years as a journalist in this city, 40 years. I've never seen a city do this. Now, major cities, New York, Chicago, et cetera, are doing cooling stations. They're setting up shelters in front of homes. They're setting up fans and misters. I've never seen Jacksonville do this. Now, in the cold weather of the winter, there are many setups for years that have been set up to make sure that you keep the homeless and others warm. Never seen anything that says we're going to put you on an air-conditioned bus, take you to a library Monday through Saturday or a community center, and if it's on a Sunday, we'll have at least 2 places set up.
Now, this seems like an expansion of what some of the homeless shelter providers are doing, because stories that I've done recently, they have certain shelters have these cooling stations that are available that go out to certain parts of the community. And this seems like an expansion of it. And this seems like a very quick knee-jerk reaction to the heat that we have been dealing with and are going to be dealing with over the coming years. But you're right. There needs to be a holistic approach, because it's not just we need to have cooling stations where people can cool down. We need to think of also other ways with resiliency and everything like that to, try to make the city as cool as possible.
Yes, and with that, it brings us to a close and our famous lightning round. Soon of WJCT, David Bauerlein of the Florida Times Union, Dan Scantlin, who is our Clark Kent here at WJCT, and Nikisha Williams. Thank you so much for coming out and talking to me today.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
This week on Science Friday, we're heading back to class for a little Biology 101. We're talking all about the science behind evolution, from bacteria to blue whales, Homo habilis to Darwin. We will be taking your questions. No question is too big or too small. Just don't be late for class. That's on Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
This afternoon at 3 here on WJCT News 89.9.
After this week's latest indictment, polls suggest Donald Trump is in an even stronger position to win his party's nomination, not despite his efforts to overturn the last election, but because of them. And that's worrying many, including his former attorney general.
Our country can't be a therapy session for, a troubled man like this.
Plenty for us to discuss on the Friday News Roundup, next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
And welcome back. You're listening to First Coast Connect. This is Al Letson sitting in the big chair in Studio 2 at WJCT. And sitting across from me is my dude, editor, Matt Shaw of Arts and Culture and the Jacksonville Music Experience. Matt, you're going to play some lovely tunes for me.
I got 3 new local songs for you if
Okay.
you'd like to hear them.
Now, the last time you did this, I went out and I followed all the people that you suggested. Love them all. Play it a lot. It's good. What you got for me? I need a new playlist.
That's great. Yeah, so tons of new music added to the rotation in these last couple weeks, including international and nationally touring artists. But on this segment, we talk about the locals. I want to start with a singer-songwriter named Tori Nance. She's a local, been gigging around town with the Tori Nance Trio for some time now. Self-described queen of the breakup song. So if your summer romance has gone south, Tori might have something for you. The new single is Key to My Door. It's a minor key delight with piano, acoustic guitar, and light rhythm. Some lyrics that are sure to resonate with those who have loved and lost. So here's Tori Nance with Key to My Door.
That I couldn't see. You jumped in the driver's side. You stole the keys to my freedom. I can't do anything. I don't know how to set a boundary. I don't want you to be without me. Wanna hold you closer, but you're running faster. So if you leave me, I won't chase after.
I like. Okay.
Big sound.
Yep.
Big sound. Big sad. Next up, we're going to shift gears a little bit, slow things down with Kirsten Moniel. We try to keep our ears to the ground here at the Jacksonville Music Experience, but sometimes that means we have friends in the community who find stuff for us and send it to us. Shout out to my buddy Tony from Create Jax, who turned me on to Kirsten. She's a singer and songwriter who makes gorgeous neo-soul and R&B. From her new EP, Flutters, the song All I Want was produced by another local named Ian Williams. It's a showcase of Moniel's powerful and agile voice. Here's Kirsten Moniel with All I Want.
Okay.
Take me, I'm yours. I'd do anything to live in your arms. Wrap me near, embrace me, my dear. I'll give anything to live in your
Okay, so that's my sweet spot. Okay, listen, y'all.
Hear that little clave beat in the
Yes.
background, too?
I just went
Super
on to Spotify and she only has 30 monthly listeners. We got
on, people.
we got to do better, y'all.
Yeah,
it's
seriously.
spelled Kersten Monel. You go find her on Spotify.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay.
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that, too. If you go to jacksmusic.org, all these songs have been reviewed. You go to the local spotlight section, and you can read about each one of these artists, dig into more of their music via the links provided. But no boundaries, no genre restrictions. We're covering everything, which brings us to our next one, another gear-switching tune here. Ducats. This is an indie rock project of Chicago transplant Trent Holton. He's put a great band together that's been gigging seemingly like once a week around town here.
Nice.
They're always playing. Tons of dates around the Sunshine State, too. They're at the West Palm Beach Festival, Bumble Fest in September. Several.
My former motorcycle.
You're not riding anymore?
No. It's a long story about my brother wrecking my bike that I don't want to go into. But I love that car, that motorcycle, and that sound is great. Like, that's like...
I love that image. Al on his motorcycle listening to Ducats.
Yes, listen to the Ducats. Look, Ducats only has 129 listeners on
people
on Spotify. So we got to do better. We got to give them some love.
Yeah, and to be honest, Spotify maybe the modern marker of popularity for some people, but these these artists are out there doing their thing and playing, and people are responding. So it's about more than Spotify for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, Berg of the operation. We'll be back on Monday. I'm Al Letson. You've been listening to First Coast Connect. And remember, y'all, keep your heart open for Duval and each other.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT.